So I started working on this dress a few weeks ago. It's been a little bit of a labor of love. I took these two fabrics, cut them into all these strips, sewed them all together, and then I added all these decorative stitches to all the seams. There's like 36 different decorative stitches in this. And then I cut the front bodice on the bias to get these really nice V-shaped lines in it. And now we gotta add the zipper. It is time to finish up this dress. So let's get started. So I have the lining sewn around my neck and my armholes, and I left the lining open at center back. You want to keep the lining out of the way at center back or your side seam when you're sewing in the zipper. So we want our outside fabric to be nice and flat. We're going to unzip our zipper and flip the right side of the zipper to the right side of the fabric. And we're going to line the top of the zipper tape with the raw edge of our fabric up here. So we're gonna sew right in the groove of those teeth all the way down to the end of our zipper. And today I'm going to be using the invisible zipper foot because it has these two grooves in the back and they're gonna glide right along the teeth of the zipper, making this super simple. And if you don't have one of these, you can use the all-purpose zipper foot, but I highly suggest adding this foot to your collection. I'm gonna pop my zipper foot on and we are ready to go. So my zipper is right side to the right side of the fabric. The teeth are towards the left, and I'm using the left groove in the invisible zipper foot. Now when I do this, I like to roll open the teeth to the left as well, just so I can get nice and close to that groove. Make sure you backstitch and work your way all the way down, making sure you're holding open those teeth on the left. You're only going to be able to sew so far because of the zipper pull, so sew as far as you can and then add a few back stitches and cut. Now I like to zip it up and make sure I got close enough to the zipper. So it looks like my fabric is at center for the zipper, so we are looking good. Now if you notice you're seeing zipper tape on the left-hand side here, you could always run over it again with another row of stitches and get a little closer. And now we're gonna do the right-hand side. So to do the right-hand side, we're gonna unzip the zipper and then flip it over once. It's really important that you only flip it once, otherwise you will get a twist in it. And again, make sure that your zipper tape is going all the way up to the raw edge of your fabric. Make sure your zipper tape is where your serge is or your zigzag over here, and the teeth are facing the inside of the garment. And now we're gonna do the same thing and just sew it all the way down right in that groove right next to the teeth. Now I have the zipper teeth in the groove on the right. Make sure you get a few back stitches in there. Work your way all the way down, doing the same thing. Rolling open the teeth, making sure you're sewing nice and close to the teeth right in that groove. Again, just sew as far as you can, add a few back stitches and cut. Now you can see how beautiful our zipper looks. It is nice and invisible, but we've got this big opening at the bottom of our skirt. So now we are going to sew that up with our all-purpose zipper foot. This zipper foot is gonna allow us to sew really close to the seam that we left off with when we were sewing the zipper together. So you can clip this foot in two different spots. Your all-purpose zipper foot might look a little different, and that's okay. Now we're gonna sew from the inside, so make sure your fabric is right sides together. We want to keep the zipper tail out of the way, so keep it to the right. And we want to make sure that our needle position is going to be starting where our seam has left off. And I like to start about a ½ inch up into that seam, so that way we don't end up with any holes. Now this zipper foot, you'll notice, allows us to get right next to that seam, right where it's at. So make sure you backstitch. Keep that zipper tail out of the way. Don't want to sew that down in there. Keep your edges lined up and work your way all the way down your seam. Backstitch at the end and cut. Now we have our seam sewn all the way down from the bottom of the zipper to the bottom of our dress. And now what we need to do is sew down these zipper tails because it's really flappy and just hanging out. So we're going to sew just through the seam allowance, and we're going to sew this side of the zipper tail to that piece of the seam allowance, and then we're going to sew this side of the zipper tail to this piece of seam allowance. and make sure you're just going through the seam allowance and not through to the front of the dress. Make sure you're back stitching and just stitch all the way down to the end of the zipper tape and cut. And it's gonna look something like that. So just a stitch through the zipper and the seam allowance. And now I'm going to flip my dress around and I'm going to do the other side. Back stitch and cut. And now you'll notice that the zipper tails are sewn down to the seam allowance on both sides and it's free from the outside of the dress. So it's just going through the seam allowance. So we have our zipper all in. It is looking great, but now we have this lining to deal with. We need to figure out how to get it around the zipper and make it look professional. So this is where the magic really happens. Follow along closely and I'm gonna show you. Now what you wanna do is turn your dress inside out and lay your zipper nice and flat. Make sure your zipper is not turned in for this step. So your zipper is nice and flat. You're gonna take your lining and you're gonna place it over it. And now I've already sewn some of my neckline, so I'm gonna continue in this stitch and we are gonna sew right over the zipper tape. If you've got teeth there, it's okay to sew over those too. You're just gonna continue your seam allowance and sew right over that zipper, and then it's gonna give it a finished edge at the very top. But that's not all, so keep on watching. I'm gonna make sure I backstitch, and again, my zipper is nice and flat. We're gonna line up our lining to the very edge over here. It should line up with the rest of your dress fabric and the zipper nicely. We're just gonna sew over the zipper tape or the zipper teeth there, backstitch and cut. So now you can see we've got a seam going over that, and then if we open it up, it should look something like this. So the lining is nice and smooth with the zipper and the self fabric. And you're gonna do the same thing to the other side. So now you can see that we have the lining here connected on both sides. And if I zip it up, you can see that this line here is nice and continuous. So when you zip it up, if you notice that these are not even, go ahead and adjust your seam allowance here and make sure that they're nice and even and they're both the same length. Now what we want to do is push all the seam allowance towards the lining, and we want to do a nice little edge stitch here, which is also called an understitch, because this is going to help keep the lining towards the inside later. So depending on the shape of your neckline in your dress, it's going to depend on how much you need to do, but we want to sew on the lining side 1/8 of an inch away from our self fabric, making sure that we're stitching down the seam allowance to the lining. I'm just going to stitch as far as I can into my neckline, backstitch, and cut. And I'm also going to do the same thing to the other side. So now you can see we have this little stitch on the lining, and you can already see how it's pulling the lining towards the inside. And that's exactly what we want. Now to make this lining extra beautiful by the zipper, we're going to take the lining and we're going to flip it down and sew it. But you have to make sure that you're flipping at the original seam line and not the edge stitch. It naturally wants to flip at the edge stitch, so make sure you're forcing it to flip at the original seam line there for the neckline. And now we are going to sew right in the center of the zipper tape all the way down, sewing the lining to the zipper and the self fabric, sandwiching all three of those together. And we're going to do this for both sides of the zipper. Now we're going to back stitch when we start, and make sure you're stitching in the middle of the zipper tape. You don't want to stitch too close to the teeth. Come all the way up, back stitch, and cut. Now we're doing it to the other side, and then we'll be done. Backstitch and cut. We are all done sewing, so let's check it out. So when your lining is all sewn down to the zipper, it should look something like this. All these layers are sandwiched together. Now what we need to do is flip it right side out, go ahead and push the top of that zipper out, and then you get this beautiful finished lining next to the zipper. And it was so important that you don't sew this too close to the zipper. Otherwise, it gets caught in those zipper teeth when you zip it up. So let's go ahead and pop out the other side. Let's zip it up. So you can see how nice this looks from the outside. Just need a little hook and eye back there. And now let's take a look at the inside. And now you can see how beautiful and finished this all looks on the inside of the dress. Very professional. This dress here just has a bodice lining, but if you had a skirt lining as well that was already attached to your waist, you would have just continued this seam down the zipper all the way to the end of the zipper, and then you'd have a finished lining down the entire zipper. But mine just had a bodice lining. Wasn't that easy? So next time you need to sew an invisible zipper and put a lining right next to it, make sure you reference this video. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. I hope you enjoyed how to put an invisible zipper and finish the lining right next to it. If you have any questions about it, leave it down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you have any tips and tricks to share that you like to use, leave it down in the comments below as well. Everyone would love to read it. And if you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. Also, I'd love to know what other videos you guys would like to see, so leave that down below in the comments as well. And don't forget, I teach sewing classes in my design studio here in Chicago, Illinois, so check those out at sewinganastasia.com. And the online sewing school, it's still going, it's still coming, so keep an eye out for it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.